Welcome to Everyday Digital Citizenship in the Adult ESL Classroom. My name is Rita van Dyke-Kao, and I teach at Santiago Canyon College in Orange, California.
And I'm Laura Jacob from Austin, Texas.
All right, let's get started.
Today's agenda. First, we're going to cover what is digital citizenship. We'll talk about the digital divide. We will include digital citizenship activities that we have done in our classrooms. We're going to end talking about digital inclusion and what that means in this era.
So what is digital citizenship? You may have heard this term, but maybe some of you are unfamiliar with it. So here's a definition from Ribble and Park from 2019. Digital citizenship is the continuously developing norms of appropriate, responsible, and empowered technology use. So just notice a few things here with this definition. First of all, it's continuously developing. Digital citizenship is not static. It's very dynamic and changing constantly. It also talks about norms. What are the norms for these different types of uses of technology? Are they appropriate? What's the responsible side of things? And how can students and users be empowered through technology? So you can see that digital citizenship encompasses a lot of different concepts here. And we have another definition for you.
This is from the CEO of ISTE. ISTE is the International Society for Technology and Education. So Richard Kawada, he says, digital citizenship is using technology to solve problems, to engage respectfully being key, with people of different viewpoints, to make your voice heard, and how to recognize fact from fiction. And this is the challenge of our day in many, many, many ways.
So ISTE has come up with many materials and books, and some of those published books we have also drawn from for this presentation and with our students in the classroom. So they have also come out with standards, both for teachers and for students. And these are the standards for students. You can see 7 of them here in this ring. Digital citizen is right there on the top, but there's also knowledge constructor, innovative designer, computational thinker, creative communicator, global collaborator, and empowered learner. And in this presentation, we're really focusing on the digital citizen standard.
There are 9 elements of digital citizenship that Mike Ribble outlines in his book, which we drew from as a source, which will be cited at the end of the presentation if you'd like to look at it. The first one
here is digital access. So we want to go through all of these elements briefly to explain a little bit more about them and give some examples of what this might look like in your classroom. And you will notice that some of the elements do overlap, but they are distinct. So the first one is digital access. So this refers to things like accessibility. If you have any students in your class who have a disability, are they able to access your material? Are they able to fully participate in the class? And also, any of your students, are they able to fully participate in your class and really in society as a whole? Digital citizenship isn't just about our classrooms, even though it definitely pertains to them. It really is referring to the entire online community. So this might also look like breaking down the digital divide, which we will talk about in just a minute. And how can we encourage technological access in our classrooms? Of course, this is something that's very pertinent nowadays with the move to remote instruction.
Digital commerce. Digital commerce can be opening a business online, setting up, for example, an Etsy shop, but it also means being an intelligent consumer. Knowing how to get free shipping, for example, which is really important in the time of COVID, avoiding any scams, knowing how to safely purchase items.
All right, our next one is digital communication. So as language educators, this one is very, very important. How can we help our students communicate using digital technologies? So this would refer to things like texting, emailing, using blogs, wikis, any really type of communication device, including things like Zoom, Skype, if that's still around, or different learning management systems that you might use in your class. How are your students able to communicate using those digital technologies?
Digital literacy is at the heart of this presentation, and we include several different activities that we did in our classrooms. It is the ability to distinguish between fact and fiction. Do your students, for example, do they know what information on the internet is trustworthy and what information is not trustworthy? What makes a website trustworthy and what makes a website untrustworthy? Are your students able to distinguish between the two?
Right, the next element of digital citizenship is digital etiquette. And this is sometimes called netiquette. What are the appropriate uses of digital technologies, whether it's being on an online discussion, texting, or emailing your teacher or your boss? What is that netiquette? And I think this ties well with communicative competence. Again, as language educators, we want to make sure our students are communicating appropriately, depending on the context. Are they engaging respectfully? How are they communicating in an online discussion forum, etc.?
Next one is digital law. And this includes things like copyright laws, copyright protections, things like pirating music, sexting, plagiarism, helping our students know what these things are and how they're important and how to avoid them.
All right, the next element is digital wellness. How many hours are you and or your students sitting behind the computer every day? Is it a healthy amount? Are you thinking about things like your posture, the position of your hands as you're typing on the computer, eye strain? I have some elderly students who have told me that they just can't spend any more time on the computer because of eye strain. It also refers to things like mental health, being isolated from people and being on your digital device 24/7 is not healthy for anybody. So this all is encompassed by digital wellness. And again, these are things that you can talk about with your students in the classroom. How are they coping with social distancing, staying at home, being on their devices a lot more than usual?
The next one is digital rights and responsibilities. That includes freedom of speech, ownership of content, making sure that person is adding responsibly to the internet community. You can ask not what the internet does for you, but what you can do for the online community.
All right, and our final element is digital security. And traditionally, digital citizenship often focused on this element, what you should not do, all the don'ts, and it is still very important, but there's other elements, obviously, in addition to digital security. But this refers to things like passwords. Do your students know how to create a secure password? What about things like encryption or phishing, spam, smishing on their phones, their smartphones, firewall protection, virus protections? So really the electronic precautions that you and your students can take to make sure that they stay safe online. Of course, this is very, very important, particularly for our immigrant students who may be vulnerable to scams and phishing attempts due to they may not be familiar with the culture or their language skills not being strong enough to be able to discern. So definitely something that should be addressed in the adult ESL classroom, perhaps including an activity where students create strong passwords and maybe memory tricks where they can remember the password without writing it down. So again, these are our 9 elements of digital citizenship. We can do a lot with it, but in this presentation, we will focus mainly on digital literacy, and then also a bit on digital communication and digital etiquette. All right, so that brings us to this concept of the digital divide. So Laura and we created this proposal for TESOL a year ago, actually over a year ago. And things were very different a year ago, if you can even remember what life was like before the pandemic. But the truth is the digital divide has been with us ever since the beginning of the internet and technological advances. This refers to that gap between individuals and their ability to access digital devices like computers, but also things like internet connectivity. Do all of your students have Wi-Fi at home? Do they have a strong internet connection, or is it very feeble? Do they have computers? This is a very serious concern, and I think in many ways, this is kind of at the heart of our struggles right now as we have transitioned to remote instruction. For my own context, I know we have unfortunately lost a lot of students because they just didn't have that access either to the internet at their home or to the necessary technological devices. And I know this is true across both the US and around the world. The digital divide is really the educational issue of our day. So I think as educators, it's imperative that we think of ways that we can break this divide down so that our students can access technology and access all the benefits that come from that.
And putting more flesh onto that is this Mossberger quote from 2007, which has become truer and truer and truer as we get into the 21st century. Those who are digitally literate have more economic opportunities, while those with less technological access experience societal marginalization. And I think that we can give several examples of how this is true and becoming even more true as we get further into the 21st century.
So let's just step back for a minute and think about our current context, particularly in adult education in the field of ESL. So first of all, I think all of us in adult ed, we know that our field is chronically underfunded. There never seems to be enough resources. So that's a reality we have to live with. And then Also, the relentless attacks on immigrants that have been going on for a long time, but especially were ramped up when Donald Trump became the president. This is something that I think as educators, we see this and it breaks our heart. But we need to inform ourselves so that we can advocate for our students who, at least when I look at my classroom, all of my students are immigrants. So I know this is an issue that we all really care about. But just to briefly go through the list to remind ourselves of what immigrants have had to hear about for the last few years, things like tightening of the public charge rule. Immigrants were taking their kids out of SNAP, disenrolling them from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Threats to the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals Program, the DACA program. Now, we did hear some really good news a few days ago. So we're recording this at the end of June, and the Supreme Court did have a ruling on DACA, so that President Trump tried to end the program, but he was thwarted. So that was wonderful news, but again, there's still no clear path to citizenship for the DACA recipients. Other things like raids by the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, asylum restrictions, travel bans, and separation of families at the southern border. So it's a situation where immigrants are often frightened and just don't have trust towards any type of government institution. Also, we've seen in the last few months, social movement against systemic racism. Of course, systemic racism has been with us for years, but we see an uprising and more of a awakening, I guess, of the consciousness of, at least in the United States, but also in other countries where there have been many protests and there have been some small steps, things like dismantling certain monuments, perhaps renaming certain sites. Just yesterday, we heard that the Mississippi flag is coming down. It contains the Confederate flag on that symbol. So this is also in the context of what's happening right now, and our students are hearing this and seeing this, and it's impacting them as well. And then, of course, COVID-19, the pandemic. So much to say about this. And as we talk about digital citizenship, I think it's important that we also acknowledge these aspects. Things like the racial disparity, that it's affecting people of color at far higher rates than white people. Lack of health insurance. And again, undocumented immigrants, I think it's something like 7 million that don't have health insurance. So they can't go to the primary doctor and get care if they're concerned about their symptoms. The rise of telemedicine. This is new for everybody, but if you have limited English skills, I would imagine that that would be somewhat scary to talk to your doctor on Zoom. What do you even say? So I think this is an opportunity where, as language educators, we can perhaps help our students. What sort of questions can you ask your doctor? What are the appropriate language you can use, etc. Unemployment, just skyrocketing, devastating unemployment. And again, affecting immigrants, the undocumented, at higher rates. We know that many of our students in adult ed are in the service industry, in restaurants, hotels, and then also low-wage essential jobs, perhaps like in the healthcare field, personal care aide, caregivers, and they're on the front lines and are exposing themselves to the disease. And we see that racial disparity where people of color are contracting COVID-19 at far higher rates. Also, the exclusion from the social safety net. Undocumented immigrants are deliberately not getting federal aid. We've seen that in a couple of cases. The CARES Act was deliberately not supposed to be distributed, the federal money, to DACA recipients. Also, unemployment benefits are not going to the undocumented. So again, really terrible systemic injustices that are going on. And then hate crimes on the rise. We've seen this especially with the Asian community. And lastly, misinformation, which we will talk about quite a bit in this presentation.
Mm-hmm. Thinking about the misinformation that is abounding on the internet in this time, this COVID-19 era, there has been plenty of information that has not been factual. And we talked earlier about digital literacy, the ability for students, well, for everybody, to determine whether information on the internet is trustworthy or not trustworthy, whether it's truth or not, whether it's fact or fiction, which leads us to Plandemic. It was a documentary put together by a former doctor, who was disbarred from practicing health. It received 8 million views on the internet before it got taken down. And it was full of conspiracy and misinformation that misguided, again, 8 million viewers. During this time, it's very easy for students to fall victim to scams on the internet as well. Do your students have the ability to determine if something is a scam, to know that it's not trustworthy? In this time of COVID-19, it's very important to be able to separate the truth about coronavirus from fiction, as this is a disease that is real. So actually, in this era, digital citizenship can be a matter of life and death.
All right, so that brings us to talking about the digital citizenship activities that we'd like to share with you. Some very practical things that you can do in the classroom to give your students the tools, the ability, and the language to stop the spread of false information, to communicate appropriately and effectively, and to engage as a real participant in the online community. So first of all, we have this quote here. Who said this? And I'll read it for you. "My biggest fear is that people will attribute fake quotes to me, and millions of idiots on the internet will believe them." Mark Twain. So Laura, what's wrong with this?
Several things are wrong with this. First of all, Mark Twain was not alive when the internet was around. Secondly, this picture is Albert Einstein. So this entire quotation is completely fake.
Indeed. All right. So one thing that Laura and I both did with our students is we shared this amazing website. And this website was created actually by a teacher. His name is Lyle Zapato. He created it in 1998, so it's pretty old. But it's a really fabulous teaching tool for teaching digital literacy. So you can see in the left corner, we created just kind of a regular looking worksheet where students have to find information. Like, what's the geographical location? What's the habitat? And all of these questions had to do with the Pacific Northwest tree octopus. And that's what the website's all about. It's got lots of information about this animal. So let's take a look at this website. Here it is. Help save the endangered Pacific Northwest tree octopus from extinction. It's very urgent. You know, this animal is going to go extinct. And you can see there's all these tabs here like help and FAQs, sightings, media activities, and even links. And when you read through this website, it uses some scientific language like octopus, pax arboris, temperate rainforest is hyperlinked. It looks real. Okay, there's kind of a sidebar here and images. It looks pretty legitimate, but the truth is it's a hoax. This teacher created it so that he could share with his students the importance of being able to separate fact from fiction. So I'd encourage you to take a look at this. And you can use this with your students. So what Laura and I did with our students is we had them complete the worksheet. They looked at, you know, the website. And then at the end of class, I said, guess what? This is not real. You know, does anybody think it's real? And they all thought it was real because it looked real. And their teacher told them, you know, you should do this activity. So it was a really fantastic opportunity to teach digital literacy, where you can't believe everything you read. You need to check sources. You need to actually go to those links, because some of the links talk about, I think it was like Bigfoot, the Sasquatch, and all these other mythical characters. So that would have been, you know, a warning if they had gone to those links. So what one of my students wrote after doing this activity, this is her reflection. She said, the fake news literacy activities we did in class helped me a lot. I used to trust almost everything online, especially when they're posted in a serious way. The teacher gave us an article from the internet. It was about octopus tree. It looked like a science article written by scientists, and that's true, it did. You can even find a website about the octopus tree. When I took the first sight on the picture, I thought, it's an amazing new thing that I never heard of. But the teacher told us it's a fake news. I was shocked when I realized I was cheated by the article. How come I was fooled like this? I asked myself. So you can see that the student had really a strong emotional reaction to this. And indeed, when I did this activity in my class, my students were just, they almost felt betrayed, like, teacher, how could you do this to us? No way. But it was something that I think that they will remember for some time at least. And it will stick in their memory and be that warning to be careful of misinformation, which is really what the object of the lesson was.
When we talk about fake news, there's actually 8 different categories that fake news can fit under. And we taught our students how to discern between the different types of fake news. First is propaganda. Second is disinformation, information that is simply not true. Misinformation. An example would be the Plandemic documentary. Well, perhaps that's a combination of conspiracy theory and disinformation at the same time. Number 4, bias or prejudice. And we see that a lot in our news cycle as well. So it's not wrong, but you can tell students, you can show students how to tell the difference between what is not biased or what is not prejudiced and what is. Clickbait, things that are simply there to get your attention. Satire. We showed actually our students The Onion. We exposed them to The Onion, which created some fun discussions in class. Misleading statistics. So this could be information that is actually true, but used in a very false way, used out of context. And lastly, altered images and videos. The next clip that we're going to show you is an altered image.
All right. So this is from a really fantastic book published through ISTE by Lagarde and Hudgens, called Fact versus Fiction. And they have a lot of activities in this book talking about things like finding disinformation and evaluating sources. And one of the chapters has these kind of assessments. And we do this for practice with our students, but we also had this as an assessment at the end of this unit, where students had to determine, is this legitimate or is this fake news? And then also, what app is this? So you can see here, this one's from YouTube, right? And then if you feel the story is fake, further categorize it. So from those 8 vocabulary words that they learned, which one would they categorize it? Sometimes it would be more than one, but at least one. And then any little things they noticed that made them come to this conclusion, you know, what's their evidence, to write it in the box there. And lastly, how confident are you? So this was a very valuable exercise to do this with our students. Again, some of them just thought, oh, it's on YouTube, it must be true. But they soon realized, no, that's certainly not the case.
For this lesson plan, if you would like to see the full lesson plan, you can scan the code on the side. However, what we did for this was we took articles and we gave students the articles. We literally had a lateral, these 3 things laterally that they had to go across. First of all, who's the author? Who is the author? Is there a motive behind the message? What can you learn about the author? What biases might the author have? Is the author or website supported by an identifiable group, organization, or company? Is the author an authoritative source on the topic? Or is this opinion or satire? So that was the first box. They'd have to look at the article, go through, and write about the author down below. Next, reliability. How recent is the site or article? When was it published or last updated? What do other fact-checking sites and social media giants, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, say about the author and his or her claim? So at this point, we would expose them to fact-checking sites and teach them about reliability. The next box that they would read the article and write about was target. Who is the intended audience? Why is the author targeting them? What does the author want his or her audience to believe, take a stand against, support, and or purchase? How might the content, the headline words, word choices, overall message be changed to grab the attention of different targets and audiences? And doing this once really taught the students how to go through the process and do this on their own at home and anytime that they came across any information on the internet.
Okay, another really cool website that I highly encourage you to go to with your students is called Factitious. So let's take a look at this website. So they actually have a pandemic edition, so I'm going to click that one, that's new. And basically what they're going to do is post an article and you need to decide, is it real or fake? So let's take a look, let's start the game. Swipe right if it's real, swipe left if it's fake, or you can use the plus or cross signs. So this one is the New Jersey woman who gave a fake name and disappeared after testing positive for coronavirus is found. There's a picture, there's some text that you can read. And then on the very bottom, it says show source. So make sure you let your students know to double check that. So check the source. Have you ever heard of it? Maybe you haven't. they can do, you know, they can check it, open up a new tab. So I'm not sure, but I think I'm gonna say this one's not true. Let's see what happens. Oh, sorry, that was actually a news article. Wait, oh no, I won 3 points, but it was incorrect. I guess if it's correct, you get more than 3 points. It will tell you a little bit about the source as well. Even though this source has lower standards for accuracy, it is actually true. Here's another one. So you can see kind of the same thing, show the source. InfoWars, I know that is unreliable. I'm gonna, okay, so I got this one correct because I said it was a fake article and I got 43 points. Okay, so it's gamified, it's interesting. This is a good opportunity to share fact-checking websites with your students. They can always double check before they say yes or no, if it's fake or real. But I would say, and Laura, our students really enjoyed this. I think this was a very popular activity, and you could really do this anytime. Kind of like an everyday activity, absolutely. Okay, so again, that's called factitious. All right, another activity that you could do, so this isn't so much the digital literacy side, but more thinking about communication. How do our behaviors impact digital communities? I think it's helpful to help your students reflect on whether they're consuming or contributing. If all they're doing is consuming media, maybe you want to encourage them, hey, what about being more of an active participant in the online community? Where you can actually participate. So what you could do, what I've done before is I put some of these behaviors on index cards and have students decide, is this a consuming or contributing activity? Editing information on an athlete's Wikipedia page, that's pretty active, right? That's a contribution. But using Google Maps to get to directions, it's a great activity to do, but it's more consuming. You're using the information that's there for you already. Writing a product review on Amazon, again, that is contributing. You're actually doing something active. So again, this is a good way to raise your students' awareness of their behaviors in digital communities.
We talked at the beginning about the 9 elements of digital citizenship. We talked about digital etiquette. And this relates to that. What is effective and what is ineffective in an online discussion? And our students are doing a lot of online discussions right now in the course management systems that we use, be it Canvas or whatever systems we use, or on their own, on Facebook, on WhatsApp, whatever social media that they're using. What is effective? What is ineffective? Effective, users taking the time to read and understand the original post before commenting. People presenting evidence and personal experiences to support their opinions while also respecting the experiences of others. What is ineffective? Arguing without any intention of learning something new. Their only goal is to combat other people's opinions. I'm sure we could give several examples these times of such commenting, such kind of ineffective online discussion. And then commenters straying away from the original topic. What was the original topic?
All right, so earlier we talked about the digital divide and how many individuals are excluded from the digital community. So with this presentation and with our advocacy efforts and the different levels where we have an influence, I hope that this inspires you to push more towards digital inclusion, both with your access towards technology and digital devices, but also with students learning how to use language to be appropriate, having competence in their communication online, and of course, being able to determine what is reliable, what is unreliable, what is true, what is false. So here are just some kind of hopeful conclusions here. Imagine a world where everyone has the opportunity to be an active and ethical participant in the global community. That would be truly a beautiful thing. Many of our students we know are undocumented. They don't have a sense of, this is necessarily where I feel safe and where I can truly be a participant in this country or this community. But with digital citizenship, I think there is a promise of being part of a global community by participating in the online spaces. So equipping and empowering your ESL students so that they can thrive not only in a traditional classroom or workplace, but also in the 21st century and also during the COVID-19 pandemic. We know that for a lot of higher wage earners, we're working from home remotely. Job losses have not been as drastic. But for many of our students in the service industries and other jobs, they are, feeling the brunt of unemployment, being on the front lines of contracting COVID-19, et cetera. So we have to keep trying, and I want to encourage all of our educators that are listening to this today to do as much as you can to empower your students. Yeah, so this is the last part of our presentation. I have a quick video for you. Again, this is from ISTE. They had a campaign called DigCit Commit to commit to digital citizenship, even if it's just one thing a day. So let's take a look.
Digital citizenship isn't just a set of don'ts. It's time to redefine the playbook and commit to a new definition of what being a digital citizen means. Today's digital citizens are inclusive and open to hearing and representing multiple viewpoints. They are informed, evaluating the accuracy and validity of digital media and social posts. Engaged, using technology and digital channels to be a force for good. Balanced, prioritizing time and activities online and off. And alert, being safe, and creating safe spaces for others online. Join the movement today at digcitcommit.org.
All right, well, that concludes our presentation. So thank you so much for dialing in and listening to this presentation. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to send us an email. Our addresses are here.
Thank you so much for all that you do for your learners every day in this time that is just incredibly hard for all of us. Your work and your commitment to adult learners it means the world to them.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.